about racism today in the 21st century, we would certainly argue that racist ideology still exists in America. And maybe with a biased perspective, we might say that racism in America is more severe than racism in other European nations. But when you're looking at racism in the context of sports, and more specifically in the context of European soccer, racist abuse towards non-white players is a much bigger problem in Europe than in America. And European fans and the media's abuse towards non-white players in soccer is a huge contemporary problem. So the main questions I want to answer today is, what is the source of racism in European soccer, and what is the next step that should be taken in order to combat the problem of racism? So my three main points for my argument come from an article written by a British analyst named Mark Deutsch. And so my three main points is that racism is a complex ideology that is embedded within the context of multiculturalism and national identity. Racism stems from interclub rivalries between European football clubs, and fans' abuse towards non-white players represents a rejection of multiculturalism and a refusal to accept changing national identities. So Deutsch makes it clear that racism is not simply a general abuse of all white fans towards all non-white players. Instead, it involves both race and national identity. So in fact, players of an ethnic minority who play for their home country are typically targeted because they do not appear to fit the cultural and national norm. And he expands on this more when he says, quote, "Those deemed as outside the national culture are targeted for exclusion and abuse, and often race is used to signify this." So when you want to look at a contemporary example, this picture is a picture of Mesut Ozil, and he's a German soccer player of Turkish descent. And in 2018, he played for the German national team in the FIFA World Cup, and he spoke out about the racist abuse he faced from fans and the media. And he said, quote, "I'm German when we win and immigrant when we lose." So this kind of signifies how players within the ethnic minority of certain teams are often targeted and treated as scapegoats when the team is not performing as expected. So Deutsch also points out that rivalries between different European football teams provides a source of racism towards non-white players. So in fact, fans will try to point out the major symbols of these rival teams, and they will attempt to completely degrade them as a way of weakening or discrediting the rival team. And he says, quote, "Denigrating the key symbolic aspects of rivals not only ritually humiliates them, but seeks to reinforce group inclusion." So a main figure of his article focuses on Mario Balotelli. So he's a Black Italian soccer player, and he is one of the major symbols of European racism today. And so this is a picture taken from a 2011 game. So he played for Manchester City, which is an English soccer team, and they were playing against their rival Manchester United. So in this game, he scored the first goal, and right after he scored, he lifted up his jersey and he revealed the shirt that he was wearing underneath that says, "Why always me?" So this is a representation of Balotelli and a lot of other major players' frustration for being a target amongst the media and other fans. And he expands upon this point. He says, quote, "Symbolic players or players who do not conform to the fan's image become profane objects open to be defiled. Mario Balotelli has become highly symbolic for rival supporters in Italy due to his actions, color, nationality, and football team." So in my third point, I want to address the counter-argument, which states that racism in European soccer is something that is more implicit and unconscious and naturalized, and that on the outside, fans appear to want to celebrate ethnic diversity. But when you're looking at the actual explicit actions, racist actions taken by fans, it's really hard to argue that point. And I also want to say that fans' racist actions represents a rejection of multiculturalism and their refusal to expand the definition of what it means to be a member of their nation. So again, going back to the point of Mario Balotelli, when he typically is playing against an Italian team or when there are Italian fans present, they often use chants saying, quote, "There are no Black Italians," and usually they'll throw things like bananas, banana peels. So this picture here is a picture of a banana peel on the field, which obviously is a very degrading and racist symbol that is trying to attack Balotelli. And another important part of fan racism that Deutsch outlines is the use of fans' opinions on social media and different online discussions. So just to give some context about this quote, Inter is an Italian football team that Mario Balotelli played on, and when he was playing on the 2009-2010 roster, of the 30 players, only 8 of them were Italian, and so someone posted online, Inter is a squad of shit. They're all foreigners and the only Italian is black. So once again, this is outlining Italians' rejection of black Italian players and how even though they do have players on their team who's of the same nationality, if they're not of the same race or the same ethnicity, they're not really seen as good enough. So Deutsch argues that the solution to this problem is obviously not one that can be solved overnight. However, he thinks that racism in European soccer can be challenged by reforming the institution itself. So he references different campaigns that different European soccer leagues have used as a way to promote an anti-racist message in the media. So he references the Premier League's use of the Kick It Out campaign, where the institutions themselves are trying to reach out to the fans and to the media to attack this racist ideology. He also mentions more practical methods to combat racism. So he says that different leagues should fine clubs whose fans are using racist chants during games. And to conclude, he says that while racism in European soccer is not something that can be solved quickly, he thinks that these small rational steps can certainly help to end this problem. That's it.